Well, March 2025 was quite the month, huh? It seems like every time you turned around, Donald Trump was facing another legal challenge. It wasn't just a few scattered cases. It felt like a relentless wave of legal action.
It really was a remarkable month in terms of legal activity surrounding the former president. What stood out to me was the sheer concentration of legal setbacks, particularly right at the beginning of March.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, within the first hour and a half of the month, three separate judges hit Trump with what were being called legal setbacks and slapdowns. It was like the judiciary came out swinging. And that right there tells you a lot. The courts were ready to act right from the get-go.
Yeah, that opening salvo definitely set the tone for the month. It signaled that the legal scrutiny on Trump wasn't going away anytime soon.
One of those early cases that caught my eye was in California, where a federal judge ruled that the Trump administration's firing of probationary federal government employees was illegal. It's a reminder that even new hires in government have legal protections against arbitrary firings.
It really highlights the importance of due process, even for those just starting their careers in public service. The court basically said, hold on, you can't just fire people without justification, even if they're new.
Now, our source material briefly mentioned February 2025, and the speaker described it as a true low point in terms of ethical leadership, specifically mentioning the FBI and the Judge Advocate General Corps of the military. While this isn't directly related to the March rulings against Trump, it does give you some context, a sense of the broader concerns surrounding the administration during that period.
Right. It paints a picture of a time when questions about ethics and leadership were swirling around key institutions. So even though it's not directly about the March legal cases, it adds another layer to the story.
Then, at the Supreme Court level, we saw a decision where 5 justices pushed back against Donald Trump's abuse and overreach. But get this, 4 justices seemed perfectly fine with letting Trump-induced darkness descend on America, as the source put it. This split within the Supreme Court really shows you how deeply divided we are on the issue of executive power and the judiciary's role in checking that power.
It's a classic example of the tension between different interpretations of the Constitution, particularly when it comes to the balance of power between the branches of government. And the fact that the majority pushed back against what they saw as overreach by the executive branch is definitely significant.
The source called these rulings points of light, which I thought was a really interesting way to put it. Amidst all the concerns about potential abuses of power, the courts were stepping in and saying, no, this is not how things work.
Exactly. It suggests that despite the political pressures and controversies, the legal system was still functioning as a check on executive power. It's a reminder that the rule of law can prevail, even in challenging times.
And it wasn't just federal courts taking action. We heard that multiple state attorneys general were also busy going after Trump, with the source saying they were kicking Donald Trump's butt in court. So it was a multi-pronged legal attack, with challenges coming from both the federal and state levels.
It's important to remember that the legal system in the United States is a complex web of federal and state laws, and Trump was facing challenges on both fronts. It shows that accountability wasn't limited to just one level of government.
And then there was this really concerning incident with the Department of Justice, or DOJ. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia apparently told Georgetown University Law School to stop teaching DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, threatening to block their students from getting internships and jobs at their office. The source called this a breathtaking abuse of prosecutorial power. But can you imagine using your position to try to dictate what a law school teaches?
That's a really troubling situation. It raises serious concerns about the potential for government overreach into academic freedom. And it highlights the importance of protecting the independence of educational institutions from political pressure.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental principle of a free society. Now, there was also the criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Trump's DOJ tried to dismiss it without prejudice, meaning they could bring the charges back later. But the judge wasn't having it. He appointed outside counsel who recommended against letting those charges hang over the mayor's head. It's a great example of the courts stepping in to ensure fairness and prevent potential abuse of prosecutorial power.
Right. The judge essentially said, we need to resolve this matter definitively, not leave it open-ended with the possibility of charges being brought again later. It underscores the judiciary's role in ensuring a fair and transparent legal process.
Okay, so let's talk about Trump's rhetoric. At a speech to Congress, he thanked Chief Justice John Roberts, even saying, I won't forget what Roberts did for him. I mean, what do you make of that? It seems like a loaded statement, especially considering all the legal battles going on.
It's definitely a statement that raises eyebrows given the context. It could be interpreted in various ways, but it certainly adds another layer of complexity to the relationship between the former president and the Chief Justice.
For sure. And the reactions from some of the judges were really striking. One federal judge, in response to Trump's retaliation against a law firm, actually compared it to the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, saying, "Off with their heads, this cannot be the reality we're living under." What a powerful analogy. It really captures the judge's concern about the arbitrary use of power.
That comparison is so vivid and memorable. It really underscores the judge's alarm at what they perceived as an abuse of power. It's like they're saying, we can't let this become a world where decisions are made based on whims and personal vendettas.
Exactly. And another federal judge said the laws Trump was accused of violating were designed to save the people from autocracy. That statement goes to the heart of the matter, right? It's about protecting the fundamental principles of democracy and preventing the rise of authoritarian rule.
That's a very powerful statement. It speaks to the core purpose of our legal system to safeguard against tyranny and ensure that power is exercised within the bounds of the law.
And then we have a third federal judge who felt misled by the U.S. government because of sham documents allegedly presented by Trump's DOJ officials. This judge called federal judges beacons of light and of truth and of accountability. That's a heavy accusation that the government was trying to deceive the court.
It's a serious breach of trust when the government, which is supposed to uphold the law, is accused of presenting false or misleading information to the court. It undermines the integrity of the entire legal process.
Absolutely. It erodes the foundation of our justice system. And we can't forget Trump's speech at the Department of Justice, where he reportedly desecrated, disrespected, and demeaned the DOJ. I mean, publicly attacking the very institution responsible for upholding the law is a pretty bold move, to say the least.
It certainly raises concerns about the potential politicization of law enforcement and the erosion of public trust in these institutions.
Now, while all this was happening, the source mentioned that Trump was trying to deflect attention with talk of pardons, auto pens, and witch hunts. It's a classic diversion tactic, right? When things are looking bad, try to change the subject or paint yourself as the victim.
It's a strategy that politicians often use to control the narrative and shift the focus away from negative news.
But the legal pressure didn't let up. There was even a situation where Trump administration officials might have violated a federal judge's order about turning planes around to respect due process rights. This could lead to them being held in contempt of court, which is a big deal.
It is a big deal. Contempt of court is a powerful tool that the courts can use to enforce their orders and ensure that everyone, even government officials, follows the law. It shows that no one is above the law. And speaking of that, we also heard that a federal judge ordered Elon Musk to stop a certain action, which proves that judicial authority extends to private individuals and companies as well.
Right, the courts have a wide reach. And going back to those fired federal employees, remember how the firings were deemed illegal? Well, judges ordered those public servants to be rehired, and the government is now in the process of doing that. And there's a sarcastic comment about Elon Musk's Department of Governmental Efficiency wasting taxpayer money in a similar situation. These rehiring orders really emphasize the idea that there are consequences for breaking the law.
It shows that the courts have the power to remedy injustices and hold those in power accountable for their actions.
Now, the source also mentioned how different law firms reacted to the pressure from the Trump administration. One big firm, Paul Weiss, reportedly caved to Trump for a $40 million payout, while other firms stood their ground. It just goes to show you the different pressures and calculations that legal institutions face when dealing with someone as powerful as Trump.
It's a reminder that even powerful legal institutions can be swayed by financial incentives or political pressure. It raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of law firms and their role in upholding the rule of law.
And then there was that amazing scene where a federal judge totally lost it with Trump's DOJ lawyers, saying their arguments were absurd and unsupportable and exclaiming, "You must think I'm an idiot." You could just feel the judge's frustration with what they saw as weak or even dishonest legal arguments.
It's not every day you hear a judge express such strong disapproval of the arguments being presented before them. It suggests a deep concern about the lack of legal rigor, or even a sense that the court was being intentionally misled.
It's like the judge was saying, don't insult my intelligence with these flimsy arguments. And remember how we were talking about contempt of court earlier? Well, the source said that Trump's DOJ officials were getting closer and closer to being held in contempt. It's like the judiciary was drawing a line in the sand.
The repeated mention of potential contempt charges really underscores the gravity of the situation. It shows that the courts were willing to use their power to enforce their orders and ensure that the executive branch was complying with the law.
Then, incredibly, we heard that House Speaker Mike Johnson actually floated the idea of eliminating an entire district court as a way to deal with Trump's legal losses, claiming they have authority over the federal courts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty radical proposition, right?
It's an incredibly concerning statement. It raises serious questions about the separation of powers and the independence of the judiciary. The idea that Congress could just eliminate a court because they don't like its rulings is a direct attack on the rule of law.
It's like saying, if we don't like the outcome of the case, we'll just get rid of the court that decided it. It's a dangerous precedent. And to top it all off, towards the end of March, 2 more federal court judges, both appointed by Republican presidents, ruled against Trump late on a Friday evening. So that's on top of those 3 losses right at the beginning of the month. One of these later rulings involved the Trump administration's deportations of Venezuelan immigrants.
It's notable that these rulings came from judges appointed by presidents of the same party as Trump. It suggests that the legal concerns being raised weren't purely partisan. These judges saw genuine legal issues with the administration's actions.
Absolutely. And these 2 later rulings, along with another one from earlier in the month, were specifically about executive orders aimed at punishing law firms that had employed lawyers who had criticized or challenged Trump in the past. That's a pattern that really stands out.
It does suggest a concern within the judiciary about the potential for the executive branch to use its power to retaliate against its critics and chill dissent. Punishing law firms for the actions of their former employees could have a chilling effect on the legal profession and people's willingness to challenge those in power.
Exactly. It's about protecting the right to dissent and ensuring that lawyers can represent their clients without fear of reprisal. And the whole thing culminated with 3 top law firms suing Donald Trump for unconstitutional abuse of power, calling him once, twice, 3 times a tyrant. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement coming from some of the most powerful legal institutions in the country.
It is. It shows that these law firms felt that the administration's actions were so egregious that they had to take legal action to protect their interests and defend the rule of law. They weren't just sitting on the sidelines. They were actively challenging what they saw as an abuse of power.
So looking back at March 2025, it was a whirlwind of legal challenges for Donald Trump, with losses in federal and state courts on a wide range of issues.
It was an unprecedented month in terms of the sheer volume and variety of legal setbacks facing a former president.
And what really struck me was the strong language used by some of the judges. Comparisons to the Queen of Hearts, talk of autocracy, accusations of being misled by the government. It all points to a deep concern within the judiciary about the Trump administration's disregard for the rule of law.
It suggests that the judiciary, as a co-equal branch of government, felt compelled to assert its independence and act as a check on what it perceived as executive overreach.
So for you, the listener, I want to leave you with a few questions to ponder. What does this intense period of legal challenges and judicial pushback tell us about the strengths and weaknesses of our system of checks and balances? Was the judiciary effective in fulfilling its role as a check on executive power? And how might this period be viewed in the grand scheme of American legal and political history? Will it be seen as a pivotal moment where the courts stood up to protect our democracy, or will it be just a footnote in a much larger story? It's something worth thinking about as we continue to grapple with these issues today.
It's a critical moment in our nation's history that deserves careful consideration and reflection. The actions taken by the judiciary, the responses from the executive branch, and the public discourse surrounding these events will undoubtedly shape the future of American democracy.